Rob, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Rich?
Thanks for joining me, mate.
You're welcome.
I'm right in thinking you've got a kid joining in the office as well?
There's
Will we see an
there's
appearance at some point?
there's one there, and there's one that might come walking through the door. It depends on how long this lasts, but we'll see about
Right, I'm here for it.
that.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's 6 sessions, the first back after a short hiatus. Today's session has been a long time in the making, totally all my fault, not Rob's fault at all. But we're finally here and I'm ready to pick his brains. Today, we're going to be talking through growth and wine. The main theme, driving acquisition, the kind of stuff that drives those nice upward sloping graphs we stick in front of directors. And it's relevant because for most of us in the growth space, it's one of the metrics we're all chasing. And it's the question that we're always trying to answer. How do we generate more pounds in the business for fewer pounds out of the business? Well, this week, I'm excited to introduce you to someone that knows the acquisition space better than most. He's been part of some of the best known agencies in the space, consulting for the likes of Vodafone, and even helped found MediaCom's iLab. He runs his own consultancy and ticks that marketing rockstar box. And more recently, he's using his skills for a higher purpose and putting his own money on the line, selling wine. Today's chat will give you insight into how you should be approaching acquisition in a rapidly changing landscape. These chats are designed to be short and sweet, but hopefully full of insight. And just a reminder, it's definitely unfiltered, which is the bit that makes it fun. Living in hope that somebody at some time will say something truly embarrassing. And I'm also hoping one of your kids screams across the back, shouting something massively inappropriately. Or you've got the BBC presenter who the nanny backs into the door trying to pull him back out. Anyway, I'd like to introduce you all to one of Manchester's digital darlings, Rob Weatherhead. Rob, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So first off,
Digital darling. I don't think I've been described as that before.
No, I was honestly, you're probably not a digital darling, but I was looking for something that kind of alliterated off digital. So that's what you got. So first off, most important question for all of us to judge you by, as a wine aficionado, what's your go-to wine of choice? So thinking Friday night, kids are down, what are you cracking open?
You know, when I first bought the wine business, I wrote a post on LinkedIn, which I'm not sure if you saw, and I'm not actually a big wine fan. Despite now owning a wine business. Well, no, exactly. I mean, obviously, I've kind of had to change that stance a little bit over the last 9 months or so. I do like a Montepulciano, a nice strong red. So yeah, probably something like that.
Nice. So how's 2022 been so far?
Yeah, it's been good. I was actually from a consulting perspective coming off quite a long contract with British American Tobacco, so it was kind of a transition period as you get as a contractor or as a consultant, kind of from one contract to another, or multiple contracts to multiple contracts, which happens all the time. So it's a bit of a transition period, but now properly into the rhythm of things, and got quite a lot on as we move into the summer. Yeah.
So what is your main business? What does Agent Wolf do?
So the name Agent Wolf comes from, so when I decided I wanted to kind of do my own thing, I was a little bit kind of lost for what it was that I did, in a sense, in that I kind of, my career had evolved to a point where I wasn't a channel specialist. I didn't consider myself a channel specialist. I consider myself kind of somebody with expertise across a range of channels or different areas. So I was struggling a little bit to articulate what I did, and the name Agent Wolf kind of derives from that, because I spent some time thinking about what I did, and I settled on the fact that what I'd done successfully in my career to date was solve problems. Whether that problem was sometimes a channel problem, but sometimes it's an operational problem, sometimes it's a sales problem, sometimes it's a marketing problem. So Agent Wolf is kind of a hat tip to the character Winston Wolfe from Pulp Fiction. And when he knocks on the door, and he's the fixer, so he turns up and they've just blown that guy's head off in the car, and he says, "Oh, hi, I'm Winston Wolfe. I solve problems." And so that's where kind of Agent Wolf comes from. It's kind of evolved in time to be, my work is now quite heavily in the search marketing space, or recent work with kind of some paid social on the side as well. yeah, that's where Agent Wolf comes from.
So when we last properly caught up, Six and Flow was in its infancy. So it's been a while, and then like we kind of interacted across social for years since. But
Yeah.
it was at that point that you just decided to go out on your own. What was it that made you decide to start cutting your own path?
I think my background before that, as you probably know, but maybe other people don't, it was all agencies. So a number of independent agencies, some that scaled rapidly, some that didn't. A couple of network agencies as well. You mentioned MediaCom. I also did some time at Dentsu Regis. So I'd kind of seen what I felt like, or felt at that point, I'd seen all areas of the agency landscape. And I kind of felt I'd done that bit, and I remember the Christmas before I actually went on my own, and I was writing some kind of, I'm not a massive kind of resolution person, but I was writing some kind of goals for the year, and the career one was I wanted to be in control of my own destiny, and I didn't feel I was. So in the network job I was in at that point, big agency, big structures, big business, 10 levels above you, of people making decisions that influence your role, your career, what you do. So at that point, it was about being in control of my own destiny, and obviously by that point, I had children, two young children at that stage. Now I've got three, and also I was doing kind of the commute into Manchester every day and back every day. Probably see my kids for an hour a day. So I wanted that flexibility as well. I had no issues with working long hours. It was more about when those hours were. So I remember a conversation with some colleagues, and I was saying, well, I'd have no problem getting up and doing some work at 6 o'clock in the morning if I meant that I had a break at 8 and took the kids to school. And that sort of flexibility obviously didn't really. I mean, obviously COVID's changed a lot of this, but at that time, that flexibility didn't really exist in an employed world. So it was a combination of that control of the destiny and the flexibility that I wanted in my life.
So and actually I had a conversation. So I do a podcast with Joe Glover from the Marketing Meetup, and we actually had this conversation last week. So he's taken the decision to go to a 4-day week to spend more time. He's got a young daughter, about a 1-year-old. So he's gone to 4 days a week so that he can spend more time with her. And we were talking about that kind of the dichotomy of guilt kind of on both sides, because now he feels guilty that he's not working and he's not. But I think that it's, do you find now that you're running your own business, is there that kind of like, how do you balance needing to work with spending time, or is it like you're working just as much? Like how does that play out now that you are master of your own destiny, but it comes with the kind of baggage around that?
It's still a challenge. It's still a challenge. I mean, it's, in my role, even though it's it's my business, I'm still to a certain degree at the mercy of the work I've got on. I'm making commitments to clients. They've got certain expectations of me. So you've still got people pulling on your time. It's not like you kind of free to do whatever, whenever. So there's that element which pulls on you. There's also the element, I think, as a in my capacity as kind of, it's my business. I'm the only one in it. So if I'm not earning, the business isn't earning. And so it's kind of there's a pressure there, and especially when you come into the end of contracts, or you've not got sight of what what your income looks like in 2 months' time. You feel pressure to be doing things, whatever those things might be. If it's not work, if it's not work that you're billing at that one point in time, you feel pressure to be doing something, to try and maybe win the next client, or whatever that might be. So it's definitely still pulled in different directions. I think you've got to learn, which I'm still learning, by the way, 5 years into this, learning to be a bit more relaxed during the quiet times, and be confident that the work that you do throughout the year means it'll kind of come back around, if that makes sense. And the work you put into leads and the work you put into your networking will come back around. I'm still learning that a little bit, and to be honest, I mean, in terms of the hours, I do have to sometimes balance it off. The other night I was here, in this office. I mean, my office is 4 minutes from my house, but I was here at 9-10 o'clock at night finishing up some work because I'd finished at 4 to take my middle child to jiu-jitsu. So there's always that balance that you're making. I'm certainly not here with my feet up doing 3 hours a day.
That's why you have an office away
Yeah.
from the family.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, one day.
Do you miss agency side at all?
Yeah, I think as a lot of people will have realised in kind of the new world of remote working, it can get lonely at times. Having people around you, having people to bounce ideas off, or just someone to have a conversation with over a coffee or whatever it might be, has a lot of benefits. Do I miss it? I miss some elements of it. As you'll know yourself as an agency person, there's a there's a lot of adrenaline comes with pitching and winning a pitch, and even to a certain degree, kind of the ups, and you enjoy the downs. When you look back on them, you kind of like you those down moments where you've just been told you didn't get some business or you lose a client or whatever. You've kind of got to embrace them, because then you get the next high, which is whatever it might be, and it's kind of this big roller coaster. And I don't think I really have that anymore. So that adrenaline side of it, I think, probably miss. But yeah, some of
Yeah,
the
I
other
think
bits I miss less so much.
one of the things I like so much about agency, and like you're right, it's like the ups and the downs both go into the same story. It's those kind of like battle scars and war stories that you kind of share with colleagues and stuff like that. It's and like the adrenaline piece. I think I was thinking about the other day, and I think the thing that I missed most about when we were like in full blown lockdown mode was the in boardroom pitching. So actually going in and having not necessarily like presentations and things like that, but actually having conversations with people in the same room, because there's an energy that you just don't get like when you're separated. So a lot of your background is in paid acquisition, but the paid space has changed a lot in the last few years. How do you think it's best used in today's landscape?
It's a difficult one to answer. I mean, I started out running PPC campaigns in 2004, and the landscape was very different. Now, obviously, social media didn't really exist, certainly not in the way that it does now. But in those early days of paid search, the growth was very much acquisition focused. Lead generation. We worked heavily in the financial sector, in secured lending, and all these sorts of things where they're wanting leads through a website. So, in effect, you buy your clicks or your traffic cheap enough. It's just like a money making machine if you've got your system set up. I think that world's disappeared to a certain degree. The competition's fierce. Obviously, Google have kind of got the dominance where they've got enough levers they can pull to just make it more expensive overnight if they want. They just change the layout of the page, and all of a sudden the auction intensity increases and everyone's paying more and they make more money. So I don't think it's quite as heavily direct response focused as maybe it used to be. I think sometimes you have to be a bit softer with your expectations. Not that you shouldn't expect to get something back for the money that you put in, but it's not, put a pound in, get £100 back. It has to be a bit more balanced than that, and you have to be treating it as part of a broader a broader digital marketing mix, whereas maybe in the early days you could just plow all your money into paid search and you knew you were going to get a return on investment. You didn't kind of have to worry about anything else. Now it's got to be a more complicated play than that, and there's got to be other things. It might be that you kind of accept that part of that paid strategy is to, I don't know, drive CRM database, and therefore you get your money back when you market to your CRM database, and you kind of make some money over here, but then you get benefit over here and make some money over there as well. And it's a bit more complex than maybe it used to be. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest change.
So you work with like a range of different clients across different services and things like that, and you said like you mentioned like you've got that fixer mentality. Sometimes it's marketing, sometimes it's sales, like trying to figure out what those problems are. When you start working with a client initially, how do you dig under the surface and actually figure out what the problems are, and then how do you use that to then start determining the best challenges? The best channels to then address those challenges.
I think it's, in its simplest form, just comes down to what the objectives are. But there is a kind of there's an important piece in determining that, which is the timescales as well. So what are our objectives over what timescales? And because if you, obviously the really strong and good thing about most paid media and certainly paid search is the immediacy that it can bring to acquisition if it's done right, and that includes paid social and other paid channels as well. You look at something like the organic channels, you look at organic social or SEO, and they're more longer term, potentially more beneficial over an extended period of time, because then obviously the converse of that, you turn your PPC off, it disappears as immediately as it kind of came. So if you get somebody who's saying, right, I need this many sales or these sales, and actually I need them next month because that's my business plan, I've put this plan in place and I've put this budget aside and it needs to start happening from day one. Well, it's pointless spending a month putting an SEO strategy together, because you're not going to get any sales for that strategy, as robust as it might be. You're not getting anything in that month, and even if you put it in place, you're probably not getting anything for 4 months. So you need to make sure that you kind of take the pressure off that strategy by getting you paid right to begin with, before so you kind of take your pressure off yourself and your pressure off the client by going, right, well, let's get you some sales to begin with. Let's get you some numbers on the board that kind of keep the boss off your back, or whatever the pressure is there. Give you something to report to the board. All these things, everyone's got a pressure somewhere, haven't they? And then once we've got that established, then we'll work on your other things that are going to bring you sustainable long-term growth. Or the converse of that, someone goes, well, I've just launched this thing. I've got some 12-month plans. I've got, I don't know, maybe they've got a sales team generating sales already. So the immediate pressure is not on sales today. The immediate pressure is, I've got to make this more sustainable. I've got to grow leads into the business or into the sales team, because our existing channels are going to dry up at some point. But we've got 6 months. We've got 6 months to make this happen. So therefore, you can kind of be a bit. You don't have to go hell for leather on the paid to begin with. You might not even go down that route. You might then just start building a full organic strategy. So it's balancing that. What is our objective? What we're trying to do with what, how long have we got to deliver this? That's how we kind of choosing the different channels, and obviously there's budgetary constraints come into that, but that's kind of a given.
How do you balance out the kind of so like quite often we'll have a customer come to our, or a prospect come to us and say, I need X amount of leads by this time, and our follow-on question from that is always, what do you need them for? Like, what are you actually trying to achieve? And it breaks down to, well, we need X amount of revenue, and here's the lifetime value, and it kind of breaks down that way, and here's our meeting conversion rate, that kind of stuff. So then we start to ask, okay, is it volume you're chasing, or could quality be the shift? Like, if we could change some of the metrics, still bring the same volume. So how do you start to, when you work with a customer, how do you start to assess their, like, the internal mechanisms they've got? So like, how do we improve those conversion rates, or how do we improve the quality to actually get the same amount of traffic to do more?
I think it's like you said there, it's an understanding that the full funnel through to in effect money. Follow that chain all the way down to the point where a person becomes money, because that's ultimately what the business needs or wants, right? And how much money, but follow that all the way down and understand the influences at each of those different stages. Because like you say, you might say, well, they might say, I need I'm getting 100 leads, I need 200 a month, whatever it might be. But you might look at the conversion rate of the website and decide you can double that, in which case, by focusing your attention there, then you're going to get them double their leads without actually needing any more traffic whatsoever, because, I don't know, the site might, the form might be rubbish, there might be pain points within the form or the process or whatever that they're not recognizing. So yeah, it's just as you described it there, it's understanding. I guess the challenge you have, and the ones kind of I shy away from or walk away from, is when they can't explain that. When they can't tell you, or won't. Sometimes they'll go, that's our problem. We just need 200 leads. We're getting 100 at the minute. And you start going, well, tell me what happens when a lead comes through. Who deals with it? Well, what's the drop-off rate from it, hitting someone's inbox to whatever the next stage in the journey? That's our problem. We've got a sales team that deals with that. Or if they're the marketing manager director, that's not my problem. I just need more leads. That's the sales team's problem. It's kind of like, well, it's not, because it's affecting the outcomes that you want. So those are the ones I think where they can't explain it, you've got to shy away from, because I don't think you're going to win. I don't think you're ever going to win in that scenario, unless you think there's a way you can get those 200 leads dead easily, and and everyone's happy. But I think you're then still going to end up at some point in the future with them going, well, how do we get 300? And you've lost your easy way of getting your 200. So then you're struggling again. And you're probably in the same conversation.
Yeah, so most of our engagements with clients start off with like a strategic piece, so like workshops and things like that. And we always try and make sure that we've got a stakeholder from both sales and marketing. And as part of that session, we try to get them to agree on a shared metric. So it might be opportunities, it might be SQLs, something like that, so that we're starting to look at it from both ends and what they can do to actually do it. Because if you end up in that scenario, that marketing director has obviously got his target that he's been given by the board saying, I need extra lead. The sales director, his target, which is sales. But sometimes if they're not pointing in the same direction, the whole thing breaks down and becomes a complete mess.
Yeah.
So
what do you do in that situation when they can't agree?
Well,
because there's conflicts, a lot of conflict between marketing and sales. It's like if you can't get those guys to agree on what the metric is, how do you deal with that?
So typically what we'll do, so like we go through the process and try and get them on board. So we'll chronologically map out a client journey. And then in that client journey, we're mapping out automations, like content, that kind of stuff that is kind of based around that chronological journey. Then we start to bring into life cycle stages, that kind of stuff. And then we start to open up the conversation for, okay, at what point is sales able to start influencing what's happening in this? Okay, SQL, fine, because that's when you're starting to accept leads in from marketing or whatever. And marketing, what are you doing up to this point? And then we start to have those conversations that opens up it's not just about marketing firing into the system. Marketing can also be engaged in those kind of back end pieces as well. So like nurturing, stuff like that. And we open up that conversation, hopefully get the cogs turning, and then start to dial it back a little bit and say, okay, so which one of these phases is overlapping where you can both influence it and both kind of drive this growth on? Because you're saying to marketing there, like if they're making more revenue from the work that you're doing, surely that's going to mean more budget coming back in. And likewise to sales, if they're sending you better leads and more engaged in those leads, you're going to get more sales at the back end. So actually you both stand to win out of this second half of the model. That's generally the conversation that would go through. But it's not always the easiest of conversations when you've got incumbents and kind of long tenured sales directors typically.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of businesses, as you I'm sure you'll know, sales have a very sometimes disproportionate kind of seat at the table, or disproportionate influence on a business, where as a marketer you look at it and you go, that's not right that they're driving this conversation, that they've got the influence of the board or the MD or whatever it might be, because marketing should be driving this marketing conversation, not sales. But it's the nature of some businesses, isn't it?
I think that's some businesses are still making the mistake of just seeing marketing as a cost center, like sales as a revenue generator and marketing isn't. And that's where like the whole revenue operations piece is like really starting to take flight, where it owns both of those functions under a centralized kind of hub. So you don't just tell clients what to do with their acquisition. You've actually put your own money on the line with the Ecommerce business as well. Tell us a bit about that. What is it?
So as we mentioned at the top, it's a wine business. So kind of how this came about was, so it's not the Christmas just gone, the Christmas before, and I was kind of working over that Christmas week, kind of covering some work for one of my contracts. Not much going on, so I was just kind of sat there twiddling my thumbs, sending the odd email over there, but I had to kind of be on. And I just got to thinking, it'd be nice to have something of my own, to want to apply, my capabilities to, but also maybe something that scaled a bit more than a consultancy business where you're selling on time. You've kind of got only so many hours to sell, unless you're kind of productizing things. So something along those lines, and it kind of snowballed a little bit, because so I went looking around. I was just biding my time on the internet. I initially started looking at websites for sale and things like that. I've done a bit in the past, built the odd website here or there, the odd affiliate site here or there, sold a few domains, just tinkering a bit. So I was looking at websites for sale, and then that kind of became businesses for sale, and then one thing led to another. But it was one of those where I saw this business for sale, which was predominantly e-commerce. So I thought, well, it's kind of a website with stock, really, is what it is. They're calling it a business, but it's a website with stock. And it was a wine business, so I kind of inquired about it softly, but at the time, basically I had too much stock because they weren't advertising it with the stock cost, which obviously you need to buy, and the stock cost was kind of the same cost as the business, so it was kind of like double the advertised price in the end when you got to the nuts and bolts of it. So it was probably going to go quiet at that point, and then a friend of mine rang me that kind of a couple of weeks after, so probably the January time. I would say out of the blue. I'd probably not spoken to him for 6 months, and this is one of my friends from, we grew up together, high school, used to play rugby together, and he runs 5 pubs in Rochdale, and he rang me, and he was just ringing for a chat, just because we hadn't spoken in a while. I said, funnily enough, I'm thinking about you the other day because I've seen this wine business. What do you know about kind of wine? Funnily enough, and so we just kind of got talking about it, and he was like, "Well, he'd been looking for some, because obviously he'd just been hammered by the pandemic. I mean, he's very he's good at what he does, very good at what he does. He's survived where a lot of people would not have survived, and he's come out of that, and he'll come out of it. He's come out of it a lot stronger, and will continue to get stronger still. But at that point, he was like, I don't want to see that. I don't want this to happen again. Who knew what was going to happen? And it still might, right? There might be another pandemic next year, whatever. So he was looking at options for kind of pandemic proofing his business, I guess, for want of a better way of describing it. So it just kind of came together, and I was saying, well, I'm looking at this business. I've looked at this business. It's not really turning over what it needs to for what they want for it. But maybe if your pub started buying wine from it, then all of a sudden it escalates. You can build the trade side as well as the retail side, the e-commerce side. Maybe there's something in it, and so we did it. It was just oh no, sorry, no, there's a third. So there's a third business partner, who is his business partner on the pub, sorry, as well. So that's how that comes together. But he actually owns a storage unit. So all of a sudden we had me wanting to run the website. The one business partner is like, well, I know the trade side and I can get it into all these pubs. And then another one going, well, you can keep it all here if you want. So it was like, it just kind of came together quite nicely at that point. So the three of us just decided to do it.
And so do you use it as a platform so like, I'm similar, right? So like whenever I get bored, I start tinkering with stuff and like playing with ideas, and like my wife's got a business that like I'll tinker with her website sometimes and play around with like some of the Ecomms mechanisms, and I'll do stuff in the back of HubSpot just to play around with ideas. Do you use it as a base to like tinker and test and like play with, basically?
I think I'm too scared to push it too far, because obviously it's my money on the line, right? So I don't want to break anything. I don't want to be the one that tanks the website. But yeah, I guess I do. You can be a bit more free than maybe you would be with a client side, for example. Where they've got. We've got no brand guidelines. We can say or do what we want. We can make ourselves look or, do whatever we want. There's no marketing manager there saying you can't say that, you can't do that. So I guess you do kind of push the boundaries in that respect. But there is that, it is different in a dynamic sense, is that I'm worried that I'm going to break something, and that that I'm going to send everything going the wrong way. So that probably holds me back as well at the same time.
What's your biggest learning from being business owner and marketer? So like actually marketing something that your skin's in the game.
That it's hard to get people to buy stuff. It's harder than you think to get people to buy stuff. And actually you spend your life wondering why they're not, or why they are sometimes. Like I see sales come in and I'm like my wife goes mad at me saying, stop overthinking it. Like, stop overthinking why someone has decided. Like somebody yesterday, they bought some, this week anyway, somebody bought some wine. They'd not bought, they actually came and picked some wine up for us the weekend that we bought the business, and had just took delivery of the stock because they're reasonably local to us, just by coincidence. They were technically our first ever sale last August when we bought the business. and they haven't bought anything since. Prior to last August, they were buying pretty much every month or every other month. And I scratched my head going, why? What? Do you know what I mean? Like, what made you buy every single month for maybe 12 months? Then all of a sudden stop for 9 months, and now you're back buying again. I try and understand these things. I want to understand why, so I can obviously make you buy again, or or whatever. But
have you asked them?
People's behaviour. I haven't actually asked this one. I can't email her and ask her why she's come back, because I've met her. Obviously, she came to Bits and Manifolds. So yeah, but
Well, I mean, I could think of one reason why she would stop drinking wine for 9 months.
Well, there is that. I mean, I'm not sure she's that age, but maybe that is the the case. But I think I find myself trying to microanalyze these things and understand. I want to be able to look at the data and spot something and go, right, well, that means we need to do this. Maybe it's, I don't know, even like I download all the sales data, run it and say, well, what's the time frame between first and second purchase, when we should be incentivizing, all that sort of stuff. It's all over the place. I can't spot anything that makes me. I want to be able to make that decision, right? And the reality is, people are weird, right? People make strange decisions, especially, and I think people, when it comes to wine, but obviously I'm sure there's other products very similar, but they're so set on what they like and what they don't like, and what's right and what's wrong. And I had a guy rang the wine company phone out of the blue, never bought from us before. Said, I can't remember, have you got this particular type of wine? It wasn't a wine particularly, it was a type of wine. It has to be under 14% alcohol by volume. I said, well, we've got one, and I was literally looking at the website, because I don't know the stock off the top of my head. I'm like, surely he's looked at the website already. He hadn't. So I looked at the website. Well, we've got one. It's 13%, so it's under 14, but it's not. It's not much. He's like, are you sure? So I got someone in the stock room to check it. Yeah, it's definitely 13%, and he just bought it all. And this is a wine he's never tasted that particular wine before. It's that type, but he was just so set in his mind that if I can get that wine, and it has to be under 14%, because it gives him a bad head if it's over 40%, whatever. And he just bought it all, and it's just his behaviour I've never really experienced in other I'm sure there's other industries that are similar, but to me this is funny people. You just can't judge people's behaviour. I think that's the biggest learning I've got, is that you've just got to stay confident you're doing the right things from a marketing perspective and a business perspective and a stock perspective, and just keep going, and just keep going, and if you keep doing that, then hopefully it all comes good.
It's a wild time to have started up a new business venture as well. But I think it's
I mean she did. I mean, the previous owner did very well out of the pandemic. So if you look at the sales, it's like ticking along, and then March 2020, she did about a year's worth of sales in a month. Literally, you can see the graph. She's never seen anything like it, because obviously no one knew when they would be able to get to the shops to buy a bottle of wine, so they just all went online and bought it.
Have you got any new Ecomms tech tools that you're playing with, like marketing tech tools?
No, I think we're still in our infancy a bit with that. We launched subscriptions reasonably recently. It's not really a tech tool, but it's kind of, obviously it's very of the now. You can subscribe to anything these days, can't you? So we launched subscriptions, which is an interesting one. We just had our first couple sign up to that. Kind of the first part of the year has been focusing on getting the trade side of the business working, because we need both sides to work in tandem, really. But no, we need to. I've got kind of a bit of a semi roadmap in my head for this year. We don't do very well at upsell, cross-sell, all these basics that we've got to get right yet, which should be reasonably straightforward when you look at the sales model. You present someone with, here's a similar wine, plus if you buy this one and you tip over the free delivery tier and things like that, then that it should be reasonably straightforward. So we'll play around with that this year, I think.
External geopolitical events, is obviously the world's been on fire for a couple of years. Things like cost of living, inflation, all of that fun stuff that everybody loves to talk about. They're often indicators that consumers and B2B buyers as well are starting to batten down the hatches. You've been in the marketing, so 2004, you were doing PPC campaigns. Yeah. You've seen some recessions and all sorts of shit happen. you've been in the game long enough to know that kind of ebbs and flows. What would be your advice to marketers know that we're going into a period like that?
I think there's a couple of bits. One is don't be tempted to cut everything. You know, I've seen a lot of businesses cut that and do that, and they literally they approach, probably because it comes from a board director, that there's a directive, but so it's understandable to some degree. But it's like the question becomes, what can we cut, right? And when your question becomes, what can we cut, with pressures from board members and stuff like that, you end up cutting things that you don't need to, or that could be generating your sales. There are always areas where you can trim the fat and stuff like that. And nice to have areas, but try not to cut too much, really, because there is, I mean, for the most part, there's always someone out there still looking, right? There might not be as many people might be shy with budgets or whatever it might be, but there are people there, and if you're the business saying what can we cut, then so are all your competitors. So if you can hold on to as much as possible and keep the activity going when your competitors aren't, well, who are these buyers going to go to? They're going to go to you, because you're the ones who are active in the market, who are approaching them. And I think that leads on to the other point I'd make, which is, don't do it because somebody else has done it. Like you see this scenario where someone goes, well, competitor X has just paused all their ad spend, or competitor Y has just done this with their pricing, or they've sold off all their stock, or whatever they're doing. It's like, then really what they're saying is, should we be doing that too? When they make all these points, is that what we should be doing too? And most of the time the answer is no. I mean, obviously there might be a situation where competitor X and Y knows a lot more than you do, but most of the time the answer is no, because they've got their business, you've got yours, and they're different. Even if you're in the same market, they might have different costs, you've got different costs, and so don't do something just because somebody else does. And actually, these things can be opportunities if you're brave enough. I mean, I don't know what you saw in the first lockdown, but I mean, my first. So probably the first 6 to 8 weeks of pandemic world for me were pretty terrible. Like all my work disappeared overnight. I fought to keep some bits and pieces on, but not enough. And then it started coming back in a different way. And the businesses I was speaking to, some of them were doing kind of what I'm saying now, is like, they're going, well, I can see through this. I know I can see my way through this, and actually I'm going to use it as an opportunity to be in a better place when I come out the other side. So I'm going to redo my website. I'm going to, get my SEO up to scratch. I'm going to look at what paid channels I can be doing. I might not spend on them yet, but I'm going to get the plans in place so that when the time's right to press the button, I just have pressed the button. And then they come out the other side, and all of a sudden they're motoring and they're moving at a momentum that anybody who just stopped everything hasn't got, because they've stopped everything. The furloughed all the staff. There's no one there to do anything. So they're then maybe 2-3 months behind everybody else. And I think those are the business, in those situations, those are businesses that then go on to thrive, not the ones who stopped everything and just went, right, well, let's shut the doors for 2 months, because then you're just on the back foot.
We had a double whammy. So we were, like, as horrible as it's to say, we were well positioned for the pandemic, because we had like retainer clients who were working in B2B spaces that were 2 or 3 stages removed from like consumer type stuff. So it was fairly well insulated at that point. But also, a lot of the stuff that we do is often positioned as an alternative to things like trade shows, like face-to-face type activity. So at one level, we had a bunch of people saying, we need to move all of our stuff online. Now we've tried to rapidly grow this side of the business. Great. So we can do that. But then we had like the CRM side. So like implementing large format, like HubSpot rollouts. We had a lot of people going, everything else is fucked. We might as well do it now. Like, so like we've got these big projects that need doing. Everything else is broken. So we might as well do this now. So it's not going to cause issues when we do it down the line. So like we had that kind of double, but there was about a 4-week period where we were like, all right, how are we going to weather this? What's our burn rate, and like metrics we've never really cared about before. So yeah, it was interesting. How did you get into growth to begin with?
I'm kind of, I won't say by accident. I mean, I studied marketing at university, and so it's kind of my education kind of went down a bit of a funnel from, obviously GCSEs, business studies A level. Like the marketing angle of that, ended up going to uni to do marketing. And then what obviously this is back in the day, so the internet was kind of in its infancy then, but there was a module to my marketing degree which was called internet marketing, and it was actually something that was called e-marketing at that point. In e-marketing, which is a phrase that doesn't really exist, isn't it? But that's what it was called, and effectively it was about the internet, right? And it was about the digitization of marketing, and obviously, in hindsight, it was very, very basic, and didn't really touch on anything that really exists right now. But having completed that, I was kind of looked at my degree when I was coming out of my university and thought, well, I liked that. It kind of played. It's marketing, which I've kind of what I've studied. It played to some of my strengths because I'm quite strong numerically, and there's a lot of data involved, and talk of data at that point because it was more about email and things. Yeah. So I kind of looking at that, and then I ended up kind of falling into a job in a marketing agency in Warrington, or an online marketing agency in Warrington, which is then called Latitude. Sorry, it was then called Cork and Global, which became Latitude, which is now Jellyfish, but that's a whole story. So, and it was just kind of, I won't say it was by accident, because there is that kind of design there where I'm looking at these angles to go for, but I had no idea, at that stage, you're coming out your first job, no idea whether it's going to be a nightmare or whether it's going to be great, right? And that agency ended up going on to, I was kind of employee number 20, I think, at the time, which at the time is quite big for an agency. But we went up to being 120 staff within maybe 3 years or something like that. It was because it was in the early days of PPC, strong entrepreneurial leadership who latched onto PPC and gone, this is the thing that we're going to throw everything at because we think it's the future and we can make money, clients want to buy it, all that sort of stuff. And so it just kind of happened, and being in that environment, one developed a bit, I guess, an entrepreneurial edge to everything you were doing. It was very, I won't say we're making it up as we went along, but everything was changing day to day. Everything changed. Every day there was another client. Every day there was this, that, and the other. At the time, Google was about 15% of the market, and obviously over a period of time that accelerated through. The business, as I said, was very entrepreneurial, and it just grew like wildfire. And I think you're just in that environment. You're used to adapting and growing and responding to what's going on. And also, it gave me a grounding where I started off running PPC campaigns, did that for a while, became an account manager for a while, became kind of a head of search for a while where I had SEO and PPC underneath me. They launched a kind of a display division, and I went into working that for a while. So it gave me all these tools in my toolkit over a 6-year period that have just stood me in good stead till now, I guess, or to the next things that followed.
What's your biggest career fuck up to date? The one that you've learned the most from? This is always my favorite question.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. I think. Well, there's different ways of looking at this. A fuck up in a job sense, which maybe makes you better at your job, right? And there's been a few of those. There's been a few of those where, in the early days of PPC, I mean, it was pretty cowboy, and overspending on campaigns because you'd put the wrong setting in, and all of a sudden you losing people thousands of pounds because you've changed the setting, gone home for the evening, and come back in the next day, and it's spent like $5,000 when it should have spent 50 quid, and you're just like, how do I explain this? And that was commonplace. That was reasonably commonplace, and I think to a certain degree, and there's a lot of industry stories around that as well, where you mess with the technology and it comes back to bite you. And I think I learned from that. I mean, I still keep a lot of I still keep a lot of campaign records in spreadsheets and bits. I know I could rely on Google and the tech, but I don't like it. I like to go in daily and check things and pull stats off, and things like that. And that stands me good because you spot the trends then. Whereas if you rely on the technology, you kind of and leave it for a couple of days, you don't necessarily see these things coming. I think that's a lesson. I think but then career-wise, as my career. I don't think I've learned any. I don't think I've very nearly fucked up a couple of times. You look back at some of the decisions you nearly made. That job you nearly took, or things like that, and you look back and you go, "Thank God I didn't end up there." Do you know what I mean? It's like you nearly took it because it was that bit more money, and then you look at the person who went in there, and you speak to them after a month, and it's like a nightmare, and like the boss is this, that, and the other, and all the business goes under, and all these, and all these sorts of things, and. I don't think that's good judgment. I think it's just luck, in a lot of senses. I think it's just luck. I think the one thing, and I always say to anyone who asks about the career, and I've done a few career bits and pieces, it's just like spend some time finding what you want in the career. And I worked out at that point you asked me before about when I went on my own. I worked out because I'd done the independent agencies. I worked out what I didn't like about that, and so I'd know whether I would go back into one or not. I worked out with the network agencies that it's not the place for me. So you kind of work these things out, and that's not to say they're bad. And then this is kind of the other kind of the maturity that comes to you with your years. You kind of go. There's some people who work really well in those environments and thrive absolutely love it in those environments. Have great careers, and great hats off to them. You've got to try and plow your own furrow a little bit and go, well, it's great for them. Let them do it. It's not for me. I'm not going to badmouth it because it works for them, but it doesn't work for me, and I'm going to go do my own thing. Equally, I don't like I see people all over LinkedIn who are kind of evangelical about being freelance or being a consultant or whatever. That it's everyone should do it because it's the best thing. It's got its downsides, and I can understand why somebody might not want to do it, right? You spend a lot of time chasing invoices. Sometimes you don't get paid. You've not got, you're sorting your own pension out. You don't get paid for holidays. All these things that actually you get, which are the benefit of having a job. People have got to choose their own path in life, and I think that being too judgmental on decisions other people make is the wrong way to go.
What's next for Agent Wolf? What's the plans? Always consultancy, or would you ever grow it in headcount people?
That's the tricky one, isn't it? That's the tricky one. Turning it into an agency. It's a difficult one. I'll be 100%. Yeah, I'll be 100% honest with you. That's one of the kind of when the pandemic hit and all that was going on. Part of me was going, thank God I've never kind of created some small agency out of my career, because just managing through that. It sounds like you did all right in the end, but some people didn't, did they? And you had a pretty bad few weeks, I would imagine, trying to think what could this actually be, because it's other people's livelihoods that are on your head effectively. Their salaries you've got to pay and everything, and all I had to worry about was me. If I could go out and get enough work to kind of bring in and pay my bills, then I was happy, and so it was a blessing in that regard. The difficulty is that people buy into me. You ask what Agent Wolf is. Nobody really knows what Agent Wolf is. I mean, sometimes some people receive an invoice with that logo on the top, but actually what they buy into is me. So it's difficult to then make that about more than just you. So maybe. I mean, I'm happy doing what I do, certainly for the next 12 months. Yep. Trying to grow the wine business, obviously. Who knows? At some point I might become a real wine baron, and I might be able to live off that. It's not on the horizon just yet. But maybe I've even thought maybe other e-com businesses like that, because a lot of the things that we've learned in 9 months of running a wine business, you could pick up and place on another e-com business. Yep. We know how to send a parcel out. I know that sounds really as simple as really simplistic, but when we bought the business, we had no idea whatsoever. And funnily enough, like we kind of took over the business on the 13th of August, and then I was away over the bank holiday, so that's like last weekend of August. So I had about a week at it of not much happening, because obviously we just took delivery of the stock and this, that, and the other. And then I was away, and for some bizarre reason, and to this day I cannot explain it, it was really busy. So I was away, only in Wales, but I was away, so I wasn't able to do anything. So I'm then ringing my business partner and going, we've just, another order's just come in. And we didn't know what we were doing yet, right? We'd only just got set up with APC as our delivery partner. We hadn't sent anything out yet. So he's going, right, I guess I better go and box some wine up. We didn't know how to make the boxes. I mean, we took a delivery a load of boxes, but we just had boxes and tape. Do you know what I mean? We didn't know what we were doing with it. Yeah, and he sent me a picture. Like, he sent me a picture of these orders that were going out that weekend one day, and I was like, I said, "Fucking hell, mate! We almost look like we know what we're doing." And but that's how it felt. It felt like we haven't got a clue here. We're just making it up. But back to my point, I think a lot of the learnings of selling something online, the customer service that comes with it, what you have to do to then get it to the person and manage their expectations along the way, are equally as applicable to any other ecom business. So maybe another ecom business. If I can,
could you not take those learnings into Agent Wolf and basically become the fixer for e-commerce businesses?
Yeah, I think there's still maybe in a few years. I think there's still a lot of people who know a lot more than me. maybe small ecom businesses. I think SMEs trying to go online for the first time, or startups trying to sell online for the first time. Obviously, I could take some of that into them. But there's a lot of people who know a lot more than me about when I say e-commerce, the physical distribution of products and all, and all these sorts of things. I won't mind doing another one if you can find one that'll work. I think there's probably maybe we become the next Hook Group. Maybe we end up with just like 20 different ecom businesses in the same fulfillment systems and things like that.
So last question: who do you think I should interview next?
I'm gonna stop myself saying individual names. I thought about this one. I thought what I like hearing from, personally speaking, there's a couple of types of people I like hearing from. One is, I find it fascinating the markets that have got restrictions placed on them, and that sounds really bland and mundane, right? But I've just come off a contract with British American tobacco industry, working on vaping products, heavily legally restricted. The business is pretty much run by the legal department because they can't be caught to be saying or doing something that they can't do. Big business, so you've got kind of layers of bureaucracy, but also technology and governance, and all this sort of stuff going on. There's people within these businesses who are trying to drive growth, where everywhere that they turn, they're faced with a wall. Right, they're faced with another wall or another blocker, and I think that they're some of probably the most underappreciated marketers that exist anywhere. Because I'm not saying it's easy being a marketer or a growth marketer in, I don't know, Innocent Smoothies or someone like that, who effectively, or Paddy Power, who will push the boundaries as far as you want to push them. Big budgets, say what you want, PR, all PR is good PR, that kind of mentality. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's a lot easier than when you're in a restricted marketplace and there's just barriers at every hurdle. It feels a bit bland at times, but those people have got to be some of the strongest marketers out there, because they've got to find ways of navigating these systems and find ways of getting the growth where it shouldn't really exist. Yeah. So some people like that, I really enjoy hearing from. I'm trying to think of any others. I mean, I'm a bit fascinated with TikTok at the minute. I've not quite worked it out. I don't understand it.
I think you've just aged yourself there.
Yeah, no. And I'm happy to, by the way. I'm happy to. But you see people who kind of like, but it's got the potential to be the next big advertising, platform, and I know people shouting about the results that they've seen through it. It's not like it doesn't exist yet. It kind of does, probably in smaller circles than in paid search and paid social. But yeah, I'm kind of fascinated by that. I think someone who's doing things in that space would be really interesting to hear from, even just the creators in that space, because I just can't for the life of me understand what the hell you put on there, right? Let me be honest, what you put on there that's going to be successful. Why one thing's, what do people look at that's on there? It does fascinate me without me even having any clue about what you do with it. I think the people who work that out are going to be the next big kind of success stories.
Nice. I'll see what I can find and see if I can get them on. Rob, thanks for joining me for doing the 6 sessions. If anybody wants to follow up with you either about Agent Wolf or the wine business, how do you want them to connect with you?
LinkedIn. I'm all over Twitter. Yeah, you can get me there. I've got my own personal website. You can email me if you want. Yeah, I'm not that difficult to find.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you
Rich.
next week. Pleasure, mate.
Cheers, Rich.
Good to catch up.
Yeah. See you soon.